2 seconds. The godfather of Harlem and the minister locked gazes across the sea of heads. No words exchanged, no muscle moved, just two kings acknowledging the game was rigged. February 21st, 1965. The Audubon Ballroom. Thomas Hagen stands up, the sawed-off sliding from his coat. 400 sheep in the room had no clue the wolf was loose. But Bumpy? He was the shadow lurking 10 feet behind the hitman. The heater was already in his palm. Finger on the trigger. One squeeze, one dead shooter. And the legend lives on. That's when Malcolm turned. He clocked Bumpy. He clocked the iron, and he saw the choice Bumpy was about to make. Malcolm gave a slow shake of the head. Then he smiled. Bumpy's eyes drifted down to the obstacle between them. A little girl in a brown dress, pigtails, maybe 6 years old. She'd slipped off her pop's lap and climbed onto a chair, leaning right into the aisle, right into the line of fire. If Bumpy squeezed that trigger now, the slug would tear through the kid before it ever touched Hagen. Bumpy looked up. Malcolm mouthed the code. "I die standing." The shotgun blast cracked like thunder in the ballroom. 2 seconds later, history decided Bumpy Johnson didn't save Malcolm X. But the work he put in for the next 15 seconds? That's the reason the killer never walked out of there. To get the real story of that Sunday, you gotta go back to the blood oath Bumpy made 3 days prior. February 14th, 1965. Valentine's Day. 2:46 in the morning. Malcolm's crib in Queens goes up in smoke. Molotov cocktails through the glass. His wife, Betty, the 4 daughters trapped. The oldest was just 6. They barely made it out alive, standing in the freezing street, shivering in nightgowns, crying, covered in soot, watching their sanctuary burn. Malcolm knew the players. The Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad's muscle. The brothers he once broke bread with. They wanted him in the ground for walking away, for exposing the corruption at the top, for speaking the truth when the bosses demanded silence. The morning after the fire, Bumpy Johnson walked into Columbia Presbyterian like he owned the joint. No call, no flowers, just showed up at dawn, tailored suit sharp, fedora low. He found Malcolm in the waiting room. While the docs checked the kids for smoke, Bumpy sat down. Didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Give me 48 hours. The guys who lit that match won't see Wednesday." Malcolm stared at the floor, heavy with the weight of it all. When he spoke, the voice was steady, but the soul was tired. "I do that, and I become exactly what they say I am. A hypocrite hiding behind a gangster's piece. You'd be breathing, but I'd be dead inside." Malcolm turned to face him. 10 years I preached that violence breeds violence. I can't fold on my principles just because I'm scared. Bumpy's jaw set like stone. "This ain't about principles, Malcolm. This is about your blood, your wife, your babies. They almost roasted them alive last night." "I know." Malcolm's voice cracked. "But if I let you handle my business with lead, I destroy everything I built. Blood for blood is a cycle. I'm here to break the wheel." Bumpy respected the answer, hated it, but respected it. "Then let my soldiers cover you. 24/7, my best button men, armed, watching every corner." Malcolm shook his head. "You're a dead man walking, Malcolm. You know this." Malcolm extended a hand. "Maybe, but I'll go out clean. I'll die standing." Bumpy took the hand. A solid grip. "They won't walk away from this." "I know," Malcolm whispered, "but don't do it for me. I've made my peace." At the door, Bumpy paused. 3 days, Malcolm. I'm giving you 3 days to get smart." Malcolm just smiled. "I won't." 3 days later, Saturday night, Bumpy's phone rings at 2 a.m. It was a 19-year-old kid named Jerome, busboy working the graveyard shift at a diner on the boulevard. Kid grew up 3 blocks from Bumpy's territory. Like every young buck in Harlem, he knew who to dial when the vibe got dangerous. "Mr. Johnson?" The kid's voice was rattling. 3 guys just left. corner booth, talking about handling the preacher problem. Mentioned tomorrow. Mentioned the Audubon. Mentioned shotguns. Bumpy sat up, eyes instantly sharp. Names? One of them. They called him Hagen. Thomas Hagen. Bumpy closed his eyes. He knew the name. The nation's enforcer. Cold. Efficient. A true believer who thought pulling a trigger was holy work. You did good, Jerome. Real good. Now bury this memory. Bumpy hung up and dialed Malcolm immediately. No answer. Sent word through the grapevine. Silence. Sunday, February 21st. Bumpy Johnson broke the cardinal rule. He went in solo. 2:15 in the afternoon. The Audubon Ballroom was packed tight. 400 souls, families, students, old ladies who knew Malcolm back when he was hustling the streets, young bloods who saw him as the messiah of a new America. Bumpy stepped in. Dark suit, no shine. He didn't need flash. Silence was his weapon, and he wore it like armor. He didn't hide in the back. He waded into the deep end. Left side, row 5. Back against a pillar. Perfect view. Close enough to strike. Exits clear. The wolf in him was awake. He started reading faces. Most were sheep, Malcolm's flock. But three were wolves. Front section. Too quiet. Too still. Ignoring the speeches. Just waiting for the signal. Center seat, row 3. Thomas Hagen. Bumpy knew that look. Dead eyes. The cold stare of a man who had already pulled the trigger in his mind. Bumpy's hand slid under his jacket. The .38 was cold, heavy, a promise of violence. He could end it now. Walk down. 2 shots. Hagen and his boys would be corpses before they hit the linoleum. But 400 witnesses? It would be a bloodbath. Panic, trampled bodies. And Malcolm, he would just be dead by sunrise anyway. You don't cure a plague by killing one rat. It is an infection. So Bumpy held his ground against the pillar, watching, waiting. 2:40. The moderator's voice cut through the air. Brothers and sisters. Malcolm X. 400 people rose like a tide. Applause shook the room. Malcolm took the stage. Simple suit. No muscle, no shield. Just the man and the truth. He raised his hands. The room fell silent. They sat. "As salam alaikum," Malcolm said. "Wa alaikum as salam," they answered back. But Bumpy? His eyes were locked on Hagen. He saw the shift. The killer leaned in, hand going for the coat. Then, chaos broke loose. Some guy in the middle jumped up, screaming, "Get your hand out of my pocket." Classic distraction. Turn the heads. Sow the confusion. That was the signal. Thomas Hagen stood up. Coat open. Sawed-off shotgun exposed to the world. A street sweeper. Brutal. Bumpy had the .38 in his grip. Halfway out the jacket. Finger on the trigger. 10 feet. Clean shot. Then, he saw her. The little girl with white ribbons. While the world went crazy, she climbed her chair, leaning back, looking right at the trouble. Dead center between Bumpy and Hagen. If he fired now, that downward angle, he would go right through her. Bumpy clenched his jaw, stepped left, trying to find the line. Blocked by the crowd. Stepped right. Same story. Then Malcolm turned, not at the shooter, at Bumpy, like he knew Bumpy was his shadow. 2 seconds stretched into eternity, their eyes locked. In that frozen hell, Malcolm understood. He saw the steel in Bumpy's hand. He saw the desperation on the boss's face, the cold calculation, the impossible math of death. He saw the girl, innocent, oblivious, leaning into the fire in her Sunday best. Malcolm knew Bumpy had the nerve, but he knew that slug would tear the child apart to get to Hagen. Bumpy was asking the silent question, the one that breaks men. Is your life worth hers? 10 years, Malcolm preached it. No life sits higher than another. Children are off limits. Sacred, even righteous violence leaves a stain. The road matters as much as the destination. Time to prove it. No speeches, just a choice. Malcolm gave the only answer a king could give. He shook his head, slow, deliberate. Then, a smile. No fear, just peace. He mouthed 3 words. I die standing. Bumpy's finger turned to stone. The guy in front shifted. View blocked. Bumpy shoved forward, desperate to see. Boom! The blast tore the air apart. When Bumpy finally cleared the line, Malcolm was stumbling back, red blooming on his chest, fighting to stay vertical, fighting gravity. But 2 more hitmen rushed the stage, pistols singing, firing, firing, firing. 16 rounds found their mark. The giant fell. And Bumpy Johnson, the man who stopped Dutch Schultz, the man who stared down the Mafia, 30 years of wet work, yet his trigger finger turned to stone. The only life that mattered was slipping away, and he was powerless to stop the bleeding. The ballroom transformed into a slaughterhouse of panic. Screams pierced the air as mothers shielded their young with their own bodies, praying for salvation. Thomas Hagen, the rat with the shotgun, bolted for the door. Smoke still drifted from the barrel, the stench of betrayal heavy in the air. Something broke inside Bumpy Johnson. No screaming, no fire. Just ice, pure, lethal 0-degree focus. He moved with the speed of a striking cobra. He was a shadow on the hunt. His piece stayed holstered. Too much innocent flesh between him and the target. He wouldn't risk hitting a civilian. The air was thick with terror. A stray bullet now would be a massacre. So Bumpy ran. 15 feet, 10 feet. The Reaper was closing in. 5 feet. Hagen's fingers grazed the brass handle. 30 seconds from disappearing forever. Bumpy went low, a blur of motion. He swept the leg, a perfect hook to the ankle. Hagen's momentum pushed him forward, but gravity demanded payment. He kissed the hardwood floor with a bone-crushing thud. The shotgun skittered across the polished planks, useless and out of reach. Bumpy punted the weapon under the overturned chairs. History. Hagen scrambled, eyes wide with the fear of God, clawing for his backup piece. He reached for the steel at his waist. Mistake. Bumpy clamped onto his wrist like an iron vise and twisted until the joint screamed. The revolver clattered across the floor. Then Bumpy defied the code of the streets. No execution, no beating. He didn't even draw his own iron. He kept his finger off the trigger for a reason. Mercy? Never. Mercy is for the weak. But if he fired now, he'd be the only one standing there with a smoking heater when the bulls kicked in the doors. A martyrdom would turn into a dirty gangland hit. He couldn't tarnish Malcolm's legacy like that. Besides, corpses don't sing. And Hagen? He needed to sing like a canary. He needed to spill his guts on who cut the check, who gave the nod, who signed the death warrant. This rat stole a king from the people. So, Bumpy decided to give the rat back to the people. He hoisted Hagen up by his cheap lapels and hurled him backward, straight into the teeth of the angry mob. 20 men surged forward like a tidal wave. They had just witnessed a prophet fall. The blood was fresh on the floor, and the butcher was within reach. A fist cracked against Hagen's jaw with the sound of snapping wood. Then another. Then a storm of blows. Hands grabbing, tearing, punishing. Bumpy stepped back into the shadows. Let the streets judge him. Let them deliver the sentence the law never could. His voice cut through the noise, low and dangerous. Suffocate him. Don't let him crawl away. Make him answer for this sin. The crowd heard the command loud and clear. They pinned the shooter to the ground, holding him down like a rabid dog. Outside, the sirens began their mournful wail, getting louder. Bumpy Johnson turned his collar up and walked toward the side door. Through the hysteria, through the tears, through the gunpowder haze. By the time the uniforms stormed the front entrance, Bumpy was already 3 blocks gone. He vanished into the veins of Harlem, a ghost in the machine. Behind him, Thomas Hagen lay broken, bleeding, but breathing. Alive to face the judge, alive to rot in a cage, alive to wake up every morning knowing he was nothing but a pawn who failed, knowing the prince died on his feet while the rat would live on his knees. Harlem has a long memory. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Columbia Presbyterian made the call. 16 bullets, 39 years, the voice of a generation, silenced. Bumpy avoided the hospital. Too much heat, too many badges. The last thing he needed was the spotlight. Instead, he retreated to a sanctuary he hadn't stepped foot in for years. St. Philip's Church. Quiet, hollow, Sunday evening silence. He sat in the back row, the blood on his jacket drying dark and heavy. The blood of a friend. Father Callahan found him an hour later. "You're a stranger to this house," the priest whispered. "But you are here now." Bumpy offered no words. He just stared at the crucifix, lost in the heavy silence. The void pressed down on them. "I was 10 feet away," Bumpy said, his voice scraping like gravel. "I had the drop on them. I could have ended it, but a little girl, 6 years old, she was standing right in the kill zone." Father Callahan took the pew ahead, turning to face the gangster. "So, you weighed the child's life against Malcolm's?" Malcolm made the call. Bumpy's composure cracked. He looked me in the eye, saw the piece in my hand, and shook his head. "He ordered me to stand down. Then you granted his wish. I granted him a coffin." Bumpy's fists turned white. I could have moved, could have flanked them, could have done something. But I froze. I stood there and watched a king fall. The priest let the silence hang. Malcolm lived every day preparing for that bullet. You didn't steal his death from him. You honored his final command. Honor doesn't put breath back in his lungs. No, but Malcolm knew the cost. He picked integrity over breathing. He chose to die on his feet rather than survive on his knees. That is a rare kind of courage. Bumpy stood up, buttoning his coat over the stains of the day. Hagen is still alive. The mob worked him over, but he's breathing enough for the judge. As for the rest, Bumpy's face turned to stone. 3 men pulled triggers that day. Hagen's in the cage. The other 2 scrambled. Think they're safe? Not a chance. Bumpy's voice was dead calm. Even Father Callahan knew what that meant. Blood won't bring him back. Maybe so. Bumpy headed for the exit. But it's the only debt I can still pay. They laid Malcolm X to rest on February 27th, Faith Temple Church of God in Christ. That's where the city went to say goodbye. 3,000 souls packed the pews. Outside, thousands more spilled onto the Harlem pavement. Bumpy Johnson didn't sit with the big shots or the family. He stood in the shadows at the back, just a statue against the wall, keeping watch. Betty Shabazz caught his eye. Through all that grief and noise, she found him. One nod. That's all it took. A quiet respect. She understood. She knew Bumpy stood tall when it counted. She knew he tried to stop the bleeding. She knew why Thomas Hagen was behind bars instead of in the wind. Bumpy Johnson made sure that rat couldn't crawl away. When the prayers ended, Bumpy took a solitary walk. Ferncliff Cemetery, the final stop for Malcolm. He stood over the fresh earth, staring down at the box that held a king. He reached into his coat, pulled out a piece of history, his straight razor. 30 years. That blade never left his side. The steel that made grown men cross the street just to avoid his shadow. It wasn't just a weapon. It was his name, his law. He laid it gently on the wood. "You went out on your feet," Bumpy whispered. "Just like you said you would. But the cowards who did this, they're gonna die shaking. That was a blood oath. And Bumpy Johnson, he never broke his word." 6 months later, the 2 who slipped away were found. But not by the badges. Harlem found them. Bumpy's people found them. No courtrooms, no juries. They just ceased to exist. The papers won't tell you that. The books say Hagen did time, and the others got away clean. But ask anybody walking the pavement in 1965. They know the real score. Bumpy Johnson punched his own ticket in 1968, 3 years after he buried his friend. Dropped dead at Wells Restaurant. No bullets, no drama. Just an old soldier's heart deciding it had beaten enough. At the wake, a guy asks one of Bumpy's oldest pals, what was the boss's finest hour? The old-timer thought on it. February 21st, 1965, he said. Sitting in that ballroom, piece in hand, watching it go down because he respected Malcolm's play, even though it tore his guts out. That day proved he wasn't just a gangster. He was a man of principle. Bumpy took lives for cash, for territory, for breath. But that Sunday, he kept the safety on. He honored a friend's terms. He let Malcolm X go out like a man, standing tall. No interference. You won't read that in school. But listen close. Sometimes, the hardest job for a trigger man is doing absolutely nothing. Sometimes, the bravest thing a killer can do is let nature take its course. Malcolm X died on his feet, and Bumpy Johnson ensured nobody ever forgot it. If you respect the code of honor and sacrifice, show some respect to the channel, hit subscribe, smash that like, pass this along to someone who needs a lesson on what real power looks like. Tell me in the comments, would you have let it happen? And ring the bell. You don't want to miss a beat. Keep it locked here. For the stories the streets remember, but the books forgot.